I was still carrying my mom's ashes in the trunk of my car. I haven't even begun to grieve my mother. And I thought I was doing okay. And I was actually slowly and quietly dying. You're holding her hostage. And I was like, ooh, I am busted. Hey there. Have you been not grieving the people that you've lost? Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Samantha Ann. I want to talk to you today about how most of us, many of us, are not and have not ever grieved the people that we've loved that have passed on to this next life, and what that has shown up in our lives to look like, and how that has been impacting us in ways that we're not counting on it impacting us, and what it is actually literally robbing from us. You know, I had a conversation with a dear friend of mine a few weeks ago, and she lost her mom about 25 years ago. For those of you who don't know, I lost my mom about, let's see, this is 2026. She passed 10 years ago, and I had two losses before then. My husband passed away 2 years before that, and my best friend and spiritual father passed away a year after him. So I had a bunch of losses back to back, three people that I really loved and really cared about. So I have experienced great loss and huge grieving firsthand, you know. But I was talking to my friend who lost her mom about 25 years ago, and we weren't really even going to have this conversation. We were talking about something totally different. And I just got stopped in the spirit, and it was like, hey, you haven't dealt with the grieving of your mom. And we'd had this conversation a few times before and had gone really, really deep. And, you know, this detour, it wasn't unfamiliar. It just wasn't expected in this time. But we had this long conversation, and I began talking to her about how not grieving her mom had shown up in her marriage and had shown up in her great disappointment in God and in his ability to do what you're asking him to do and to save who you're asking him to save, and how that disappointment leaks into all areas of your life. It leaks into your job, it leaks into your friendships, it leaks into your parenting, it leaks into all of these things without you knowing it. And we got really, really deep. It was some deep, deep surgery. It was some deep magic happening there. And a lot of tears, you know, and a lot of compassion. Like, I have a lot of compassion because I do recognize how hard it is to even touch those wounds and even want to touch those wounds. It's easier just to feel like, hey, if I just go around it, it'll eventually disappear and I won't have to deal with it anymore. But that's not what happens. You do deal with it, but you deal with it in silent ways and in ways that like jump scare you out of nowhere. You're triggered by things that don't seem like they would trigger you, but they're directly tied to not having grieved the person that you loved and not allowing that pain to be released out of you, not allowing healing and a salve to be applied to the wounds so that you can breathe again, so that you can live again, so you can dream again, you know. After my husband Jermaine passed away, I was a walking zombie, man. I was going through the motions of life. I was going to the grocery store. I was barely interacting, and I'm sure it was just like a walking ghost. And I started to, probably about 6 or 7 months after he passed, I started running into people who had lost people of their own. I guess I was wearing it on my face because they began just telling me their own stories. The other thing is that people tell me their whole life story without me even asking. It just comes tumbling out. That's been like that since I was a kid, man. And it's only increased as I've like moved in ministry and moved in healing and all that kind of stuff. The stories come tumbling out, and I'm actually quite honored when it does, because I know what it takes to open your heart, and especially to open your heart to a stranger and tell them the deep things that are happening on the inside of you that you probably haven't been able to tell anybody else. So I'm always deeply honored. But I started running into people who were having these crises, who had lost, parents who had lost children, who had lost, friends and people that they loved, um, 5 years before, 10 years before, 20 years before, 30 years before. And it seemed like it was fresh, like it had just happened the day before. They began to weep with this deep cry and these deep wounds, and just is heartbreaking. And when I did ask how long it had been, and I heard, it wasn't 6 months ago, it was 15 years ago, I recognized that time, despite the old adage that time heals all wounds, time doesn't heal all wounds unless healing is actually happening. And when healing is actually happening, and when therapy is happening, and this release is happening, yeah, time will start to abate those wounds. It'll start to heal things over. I can't say that it makes it go away altogether. I'm 10, 12 years out from the major losses that impacted my life, and I still have these random moments. Sometimes something will happen, or I'll have to make some random phone call, or something will occur where I'm back in that moment again. And it's not like it was then. It's certainly not like that, because I have been experiencing a lot of healing in my life. I've deliberately gone and sought out therapy and healers and people who could help me release and express and exhale and breathe again. And over time, yeah, those things have started to lessen, and the hold over my emotions has begun to weaken. So time has been lessening it. But if I hadn't been doing those things, I would be just like those people that I've been running into who hadn't had that release and hadn't had that healing. And I would probably be just like my dear friend who is today starting her own healing journey in that area. After my husband Jermaine passed away, the first thing I did, I decided that I wasn't going to heal. I wasn't going to grieve. I was going to stay right where we parted, and I was just going to live there. We were deeply in love. We had a wonderful relationship. We were deeply in love. We got married later in life. I was in my 30s by the time we got married. And, I'd been around the block a lot. I knew what was out there. I knew what wasn't out there. And I knew and could recognize that I was in a great romance and in a great relationship, and a great love was being experienced. And so I really savored those moments. I really savored that time. I savored our laughter together. I savored our fights. I savored all of it. And I decided that I was just going to stay right there. And then my dear friend, Dr. Nathaniel, Nate, called me up one day when I had fallen into that place. And I didn't tell anybody I fell in that place. I just lived there. He called me and he was like, "You have to let him go." And I was like, "I can't, I cannot, I can't, I can't." I was crying hysterically. I was like, "I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't." And he's like, "You have to. If you don't let him go, then you're going to sink with him and you're not going to recover." And I cried out to God finally after some time. And I was like, "I need help, because I can't let him go." And I felt God come into my heart and start to like do the things that I couldn't do to help me start to cry, and help me start to grieve, and help me start to exhale, and just help me, just come in and help me. So then after Nate passed away, like the grief was just compounded. Like I was not okay. I was not okay. I was not okay. I thought I was okay. I was trying to be okay. I was trying to go through all the things and all the motions that I normally did in life to be okay, but I was not okay. And what I did is I started to do what a lot of people that I've met do. Is I built this fort in my life that was like, this is the mountain that I have to live with. This is the mountain that I'm never going to get over. And I'm just going to build little roadways to drive around it and live my life, and everything's going to be okay. But what I didn't know was that I was forfeiting a lot of life. I was forfeiting a lot of joy. I was causing the grief and the lack of healing to show up in my relationships that I wasn't intending. It was making me not want to get close to people in case they left. It made me, feel like I had to stay away and stay isolated. It made me not know the high cost that I was paying to be stuck and not know that I was being stuck. I didn't want to get close to my friends. It was just, it showed up everywhere. And ultimately, it made me not want to ask for love to come into my life again. It made me feel like I didn't deserve it and that if I got it again, it would be snatched away from me. And, it just, this fort just built, 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 built. And I thought I was doing okay. And I was actually slowly and quietly dying, quite honestly. I was dying a slow death and it wasn't going anywhere. And I was getting really stuck. So then when my mom passed, I was already grieving so much and so hard that I didn't even think about grieving her. I had nowhere to put that. And so I didn't put it anywhere. And a year goes by and it becomes the anniversary of her passing. And I had this amazing mentor and woman of God that came into my life right before my mom passed. And we became good friends, Dr. Joyce Taylor Moten. She's now in the spirit and one of my heavenly angels. But then she showed up at just she couldn't have shown up at a better time in my life. And I thought she showed up to help me with this retreat that I was doing back then. I was still trying to do my thing back then, it was like 2016. And I was still trying to push forward without any real healing. And, and Dr. Joyce came into my life and helped me navigate the worst grief I'd ever experienced. Ugh, it was awful. But a year had gone by since my mom had passed. And I hadn't grieved at all. And she called me out of the blue and she said, hey, I was thinking about you. I know your mom passed a year ago today, and I just wanted to check on you and see how you're doing. I was like, I didn't even remember. And as soon as she said it, I got frozen. And I told her, I was like, oh, I haven't even begun to grieve my mother. I was like, I am still grieving Jermaine and I'm still grieving Nate. I haven't even gotten to start to grieve my mother yet. That's going to have to be pushed off somewhere because I don't have any bandwidth for that. And she went into the spirit for me. She's one of those mothers and, one of those old mothers who prays in strong Chinese tongues and will go hard in the paint for you to intercede for you and pray heaven down into your life. And she did that for me that day. And she also spoke prophetically to me too. She told me that that because of the way that my mom passed and going on her own terms and not allowing me to really pray for her or to help her and just kind of really kind of rendering me helpless and just a witness to her passing without being able to do anything. I think my mom knew about my little fixer, you know, issues that I'd had since a child, and she didn't want me to fix anything. She wanted to do things the way she wanted to do things. But it left me feeling very weak and very impotent and very lost and very adrift and actually very angry too. And I didn't express this anger because it's really hard to be angry with people that have passed away. You feel like you're not entitled to be angry. You feel like you are, dishonoring them or, just you're being a bad person if you're angry. And anger is just a really natural emotion. I've learned that it's a masking emotion and it is an easier emotion to deal with than what it usually masks, which is fear and hurt. But a lot of times we feel very guilty for feeling angry with those who have passed on. And I felt guilty for feeling that way and wouldn't admit it. But Dr. Joyce went on in there and she said, you're really angry with how she passed and how she left you without being able to do anything about it, and you're holding her hostage. And I was like, "Oh, I am busted," because what I didn't tell her, I hadn't told her yet, I told her that day, was that I was still carrying my mom's ashes in the trunk of my car.